Good morning to you all. I'm Scott Bradbury in the Department of Classics at Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to the 27th Annual Phyllis Williams Lehmann Lecture, sponsored this year by the Smith College Museum of Art and the Western Massachusetts Society of the Archaeological Institute of America. This lecture series honors the memory of Phyllis Lehmann, an active, lifelong member of the AIA and professor of art and archaeology at Smith from 1946 to 1978. She had the kind of career that all of us who teach at liberal arts colleges aspire to. She was a productive and well-respected scholar, a legendary classroom teacher, an exacting but rewarding seminar leader, and she had the good fortune to see many of her own students go on to become noted teachers and scholars. As a scholar, she produced a wide array of varied and influential publications on topics ranging from Greek art and archaeology to the rediscovery of classical antiquity and its influence in the Renaissance. Her most significant work centered on the island of Samothrace, which you have been viewing in the slideshow on display now. Samothrace was home to the sanctuary of the great gods, dedicated to a pantheon of local Thracian gods who were worshipped in a mystery cult that had strong affinities with Demeter at Eleusis. It was the most important cult site in the North Aegean, reaching its apogee under the patronage of the kings of Macedon who succeeded Philip and his son Alexander. Phyllis Lehmann first visited Samothrace as a graduate student in 1938, and thereafter excavated for many years beside her husband, Carl Lehmann, director of the New York University excavations that extended from 1939 to 1965. She herself was assistant field director, 1948 to 1960, and acting director, 1960 to 1965, and she remained closely involved with Samothrace for the rest of her career. French and Austrian excavators had been on Samothrace in earlier years, but most of the beautiful site you have been viewing was excavated by the Americans on the NYU team. Mrs. Lehmann also assisted her husband in the task of editing the 11-volume series of excavation reports that began to appear in 1959. She herself authored Volume 3 on the Hieron, the most important shrine on the site, and this volume received the Hitchcock Award from the Society of Architectural Historians in 1969. She also co-authored Volume 5 on the Temenos, or Sanctuary. In addition, she made a remarkable contribution to the famous Winged Victory, now in the Louvre. In a museum in Vienna in 1950, while rummaging through drawers filled with sculptural body parts, she came across fragments of fingers that she surmised belonged to the famous Winged Victory in Paris. In the end, she proved to be right, and those fingers from Victory's right hand are now on display in a box beside the great statue in the Louvre. Her interest in the reception of antiquity in the Renaissance is best illustrated by the essays in Samothracian Reflections, published in 1973, which contains, for example, an essay on Cyriacus of Ancona's visit to Samothrace in 1444, as well as a deeply learned essay on the sources and meaning of Andrea Mantegna's painting entitled Parnassus. These interests were honored at Mrs. Lehmann's retirement in 1978 by an exhibition and scholarly conference at the Smith Art Museum entitled Aspects of Antiquity in the Renaissance. She attended these lectures in her honor with enthusiasm until her death in September 2004. Her passing is still deeply felt by all who knew her. And I'll now turn the podium over to my colleague Barbara Kellum in the art department, who will introduce today's speaker.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Kellum. I teach Ancient Roman Art and Architecture here at Smith. And today it is my very great pleasure to introduce this year's Lehmann lecturer, John R. Clarke, Regents Professor at the University of Texas at Austin and co-director of the Oplontis Project. I first met John when I was a fellow at the American Academy in Rome, and he was already the author of an innovative book on the black and white figural mosaics of Roman Ostia, which he considered through the lens of viewership in contemporary art, positing something he termed kinesthetic address, defining the experience of viewing a mosaic and its architectural setting in terms of a viewer's vision and movement through space. John then expanded this examination of viewership into a magisterial study of 17 case studies of Roman houses from Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Ostia, examining floor, wall, and ceiling decorations in the now classic The Houses of Roman Italy. John's next book, looking at lovemaking, constructions of sexuality in Roman art, seemed at the time totally audacious because indeed the sexually explicit material he analyzed had, by gentleman's agreement, been locked away in the Naples Museum's Gabinetto Segreto, secret cabinet, since the 1820s. To put this in perspective, John's book came out in 1998, and it was not until the early 21st century that the Naples Museum finally opened the secret cabinet to the public, albeit on a limited basis. John's analysis of this material set the terms of debate for the constructions of Roman sexuality, which continue to this day. Other of his monographs shed light on formerly neglected topics, which have now also become active areas of scholarly interest. Art in the Lives of Ordinary Romans, 2003, and Looking at Laughter, Humor, Power, and Transgression in Roman Visual Culture, from 2007, for example. Since 2005, John has co-directed the Oplontis Project, the truly dazzling multidisciplinary study of Villas A and Villas B, which he has cataloged thousands of artifacts, including the major wall painting fragments that you see in our exhibition, revealed many new aspects of the site, and has produced the first of 2 ACLS born digital volumes on the excavation, also a King's Lab visualization virtual model of Villa A, available at Smith's Imaging Center in Hillier, and in collaboration with Elaine Gazda, edited the Leisure and Luxury Catalog, which accompanies the exhibition. Given all of this, it is not a surprise that John is also this year's recipient of the Archaeological Institute of America's Gold Medal for Distinguished Archaeological Achievement. John will speak to us today about new research discoveries and strategies at Oplontis. Please help me in welcoming John Clarke.
Barbara, thank you so much. That was just amazingly, I don't know, did I do all that stuff? You wonder. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thanks to the many individuals from Smith College who have made this exhibition and the symposium today possible. It has been such a pleasure to work with all of you, and above all, to share your enthusiasm for Oplontis. I have so many people to thank, but I'd like to express particular gratitude, of course, to Barbara Kellum, to Bettina Bergman, and to Jessica Nickel for their roles in bringing the exhibition to Smith. Thanks also to my colleagues gathered here for this day's panel, Regina G., Elaine Gazda, and Tim Liddell. Their work with the Oplontis Project and the exhibition has been essential. I'd also like to thank all of the members of our team, but especially Michael Thomas, who couldn't be here, who has co-directed the project from the beginning, and Ivo van der Graaf, a director of excavations, who is here. This exhibition, for me, is a dream come true, one that I first dared to dream back in 2009, when, perhaps rashly, I asked the Italian Ministry of Culture for permission to pursue an exhibition focused on the archaeological sites of Oplontis. The Oplontis Project was then in its 4th year, and new discoveries were proliferating. It was Regina G. who first came up with the idea of the exhibition. I thought, yes, we can do this. Little did I realize the enormous amount of effort it would take to realize leisure and luxury in the Age of Nero. All of you who have been involved in the exhibition deserve a round of applause. In the next minutes, I'd like to make some introductory comments about the new kinds of research that this amazing archaeological site has stimulated. Some of my remarks will inevitably overlap with the presentations in the panel this afternoon, but my goal here is to provide an overview of our research objectives and methodologies, ranging from dirt archaeology to archival detective work to digital imaging. Let's begin with a view of the area that received the most fallout from the eruption of 79 AD. Here you see the cone of Vesuvius, reduced by the eruption by at least 1/3 its original height. In the lower right is Pompeii, 3 miles to the northwest. Then, 3 miles northwest from Pompeii is Oplontis. As you can see, both Pompeii and Villa A, or Oplontis, are much farther inland than they were in antiquity. In the lower left, you see a painted inscription on the shoulder of a terracotta jar from Lusitania, modern-day Portugal. Recently, we have found out that it was filled with a nasty fermented fish sauce called garum. There's an address painted on the neck of the amphora, and it's quite faded now. This is an old photograph. It reads, Secundo Pompeii, to Secundus, slave of Pompeii, or property of Pompeii. You can see this amphora in the exhibition. Some scholars who read this inscription hastened to proclaim that this Pompeii was the wife of Nero, and it was she who owned both the villa and Secundus. Unfortunately, Pompeii is also a clan or gens name, and there are many individuals bearing this name at Pompeii, so we can't be sure the owner was this famous Pompeii. That's why we use the lackluster term or name Villa A rather than the Villa of Pompeii, which the Italians prefer because it's better for tourism. We know from the geographer Strabo, from excavations and from paintings like this one, found on the walls of a house at Pompeii, that the entire Bay of Naples was surrounded by luxury villas. The best ones, like the one pictured here, were perched high up, either on man-made platforms or, better yet, on cliffs. From on high, they commanded excellent views of the beautiful bay. Understanding how the villas of Oplontis, Villa A of Pompeii, and Villa B, or Oplontis B, as we now call it, related to the Bay of Naples is very difficult. It became one of our research objectives, since today they lie 30 feet below the modern town of Torre Annunziata and are over half a mile from the water. Villa A was huge. About half of it has been uncovered, and this excavated area at 200 by 100 meters is enormous. Think of 2 football fields side by side. Most of Villa A is open to the public, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But as you go down the stairway, you have little sense of its relation to the Bay of Naples. The same goes for Villa B, just as landlocked. So one of the things we wanted to do was to understand the ancient landscape, and this we did through what's called geoarchaeology. We were lucky that Giovanni Di Maio joined our project. He is a geologist and an archaeologist, or geoarchaeologist, who has dedicated years of research to understanding the turbulent geological history of the region. This satellite view gives you an idea of the archaeological treasures buried under Torre Annunziata. Each crosslet is a site of an ancient villa, with the crosslets and boxes up there on the right representing villas A and B. It's clear that a massive amount of volcanic material pushed the coastline so far out into the sea. Dr. Di Maio used a variety of techniques, including vertical coring to a depth of 100 feet, to produce the geoarchaeological section that you see. This has allowed us to reconstruct the original settings of Villas A and B. In this slide, you see a section through Villa A as excavated. The blue represents the volcanic material from the eruption of 79 AD. And remember, this is about 30 feet of lapilli and hardened volcanic ash. Way up on the upper right is the modern street and the ticket office. At the top center is the reconstructed atrium, and at left you can see that the blue, representing the volcanic material from the eruption, is much deeper, and that is covered by several other layers. In this close-up, we can see what the new excavations have revealed. At the right is the reconstructed atrium. Just to the left of the atrium, we see the blue, indicating the volcanic material of the 79 AD eruption, cut through with a feature called the Canale Conte del Sarno, which I'll return to in a minute. But look at what's beneath the villa, a 45-foot cliff with a series of terraces built into it to make an elaborate seaside facade. We now know that Villa A sat high on a high cliff overlooking its own private harbor, and we can now begin to understand how impressive it was in antiquity. This is our first attempt from Tim Liddell to reconstruct both the sea facade and the views out from the terrace. That was back in 2014. Since then, with some persuasion from me, the Archaeological Superintendency of Pompeii has excavated the facade area of the facade with spectacular results. The closest parallel is the Villa of Ariana at Stabii, located at a cliff, or on a cliff, about 5 miles south of Pompeii. In these slides, you see the elaborate structures that connected it with the sea below. Now, this aerial view shows the reconstructed areas of Villa A in yellow. These are the ones you can visit. To the south, in blue, is the canal I just mentioned. It was constructed by Domenico Fontana around 1600 to bring water to the town of Torre Annunziata to power mills. It continued to function until 1980. The area in red is where the 2014-2016 excavations took place. Area di indagine, as it says. In this shot, from the excavation of the first and second terraces, you can see how the force of the volcanic material pushed everything off and down to the sea 45 feet below. Note that marble base for a statue. We don't have the statue, but we have the base, leaning precariously, and next to it, the roof tiles flipped vertically. This image shows a feature very dear to the Oplontis Project, since our first excavation back in 2006 was in that red area. I put a circle around it as well. Danger of collapse made us stop. Here's a view of that work 10 years ago. You can imagine my astonishment and joy when 8 months ago the excavators reached the point where we had to stop. On the right is the gallery that they've covered with conservation materials that leads to the tunnel and the stairway. And on the left, you see a profile that includes the tunnel. These are some views of the operation. It's getting air in there, and it takes us all the way in to the tunnel and the stairway. In this section, at the lower right of this slide, maybe you can understand it a little bit better how this works. The tunnel isn't there, but it does show us the relationship between the reconstructed villa in yellow, the one that you can visit, and the new structures just excavated in red. And then above is a 3D photogrammetric view of the excavated remains. So we can see the succession of terraces and some of the architectural features. Now we know that the tunnel from the servants' quarters connected with the second terrace level. We can imagine them clambering up and down the stairs as they served guests who were enjoying the beautiful rooms and the views out from them, perched as they were on cliffside terraces. In addition to these excavations, conducted by De Maio under the aegis of the Archaeological Superintendency of Pompeii, the Oplontis Project has been excavating since 2006. In general, before our arrival, archaeological work at Oplontis had been rather limited. The goal of the Italian excavations, begun at Villa A in 1964 and at Oplontis B in 1974, was to reconstruct as far as possible the original appearance of the two sites, to attract tourists to the economically depressed city of Torre Annunziata. And as an aside, to give you an idea of the prosperity and then the failure of the economy there, it was the center of pasta production for actually worldwide. And in 1902, there were 105 pasta factories. Today, there's one. Yeah. So tourism was a possibility. Because of their rush to reconstruct, there was no time to excavate beneath the 79 AD levels to understand the earlier phases. When funds ran out around 1981, the Italian excavations halted. One of the charges of the Oplontis Project was to excavate, and this we did and are continuing to do. Between 2006 and 2010, the Oplontis Project carried out extensive excavations in the gardens and courtyards of Villa A, and you've been looking at those dark areas, which are the 20 trenches that we opened. We have learned much about the development of the villa over time. Around 50 BC, the western core was constructed. About 50 years later, the owner added a bath complex to the northwest. Both of these phases can be dated clearly from analysis of their frescoes and pavements. Then, about 50 years later, around 45 AD, an owner remodeled the western bath complex, turning it into an entertainment suite, and created the east wing with its group of large, lavishly decorated rooms facing the enormous swimming pool, over 200 feet in length. Our trenches in the east wing to the south of the pool confirmed this chronology, since they were filled with datable construction debris from this event. Then, in 62 AD, a great earthquake brought down the columns supporting the porticus along the pool, and much more. The villa seems to have been rendered uninhabitable by the earthquake. That's a point I'll return to later. In 2012, we began excavating in Oplontis B. Here are a few photos of recent trenches. In the plan on the lower right, the pink areas represent our own trenches. So far, the most dramatic discovery is our deepest trench at 12 feet, where we uncovered the prehistoric eruption layers of Vesuvius. Plow marks on top of these layers, dating back to 1700 BC, proved that this land was cultivated already in prehistoric times. Shallower trenches have revealed, as at Villa A, earlier phases of the building. We now know that Oplontis B predates Villa A by about 100 years. So we're looking at about 150 BC. In terms of publication of our results, we have from the beginning published annual excavation reports, both in print and online. A wonderful open access resource is the journal façade Online, where we publish brief reports as well as in-depth articles like this one, which came out in October of 2016. There is, however, another kind of excavation, and this has been one of my big tasks, to dig not in the ground, but in the archives and the storerooms. This kind of study is essential to putting together the puzzle that is the story of these two complexes. But before we put shovel to soil, the Oplontis Project team began studying the archives. These consist of excavation diaries, photographs, and plans. They also consist of a massive amount of materials in storerooms, from life-size statues and big hunks of frescoes like those that you see in the show, to tiny fragments of pottery, glass, and wall painting. Let's look at the role of the archives in understanding the history of the excavations. The sad fact is that when I began this research, there existed no official documentation of the first 6 years of excavation between 1964 and 1970. There were no excavation reports. There were no photographs. So I began asking local historians and archivists if they had any photographs or information. One day, a local historian appeared with about 30 photographs shot on August 15th, 1973, when Princess Margaret of England visited Villa A, long before it was open to the public. It's a photograph that proved important for me as I tried to reconstruct the history of the excavation and reconstruction of the villa. In the center, we see the princess shooting a photograph, something, by the way, that royals are not supposed to do. Photographers are supposed to take photographs for them and of them. A few years later, I found this slide in the archives of Wilhelmina Jastrzębski. It was shot by her husband in 1968, just 5 years before the photo of the royal entourage on the right, so it's in the lower left. It shows that the east wall of the atrium, it was in a state of collapse. Only half of it is standing, and I've marked that half in the 2 slides on the right. If we compare the slide with the photo of the royal group, we see that the wall has been entirely rebuilt and that fresco fragments have been reattached to its lower part. We also see lots of other fragments on the floor. At the upper right, you see the photo of the wall today with modern plaster hiding the tufa blocks that were used to reconstruct the wall. How did restorers in those days reassemble the fragments? They stabilized the painted surface with gauze and glue. Then they put the fragment face down on a table, reinforced it on the back with wire, and smeared it with cement. Then they traced out the patterns of the decoration, as you can see in the photo above, on the wall, the rebuilt wall, and re-cemented the fragments onto it. However, what I kept finding as I dug through the mountains of fragments were pieces that never made it back onto the walls of the reconstructed villa. And it's the results of this research that you find in the exhibition. Fabulous frescoes hidden from view for 50 years. Here are some of those fragments that we saw on the floor in the photo with Princess Margaret. I call these the orphaned fragments, since they ended up in a dark storage room rather than back on the walls of the reconstructed villa. I'm going to leave it to our amazing architect, Timothy Liddell, to explain just how I put them together this afternoon. I will just say that he's really good at puzzles. And without digital tools, his work could never have been done. In the show, you see the actual fragments against a drawing, something like this, displayed as a reconstruction of how they fit into the scheme. Actually, we were able to replace, that is, put back into place, this part of the reconstruction with the actual wall, the existing wall below, and then imagining what the upper wall would look like. Imagine trying to do this by physically manipulating these extremely heavy puzzle pieces. Well, fools rush in. Here we are, Professor Gazda and I trying to do just that. This is 2013 when after 6 years' work cataloging orphan fragments, I thought I had located, studied, photographed all of them, around 5,000. But in a dark storeroom, I found a suspicious-looking pile of fresco fragments under a skyscraper of yellow crates like the ones that you see in the back of this photograph. Professor Gazda realized that these fragments belonged to room 15, the most famous of all the wall paintings in the villa. So, pinned to the wall is a big color print of the surviving east wall of 15. Above is the actual state, below is our reconstruction. Our big surprise was that these fragments represented that wall, but in mirror reversal. This means that they came from the unexcavated wall of that room. Once again, we called on Tim, and he was able to reconstruct the area of this lost wall that the fragments came from. And this you also see in the exhibition. Just like these orphaned fragments of fresco decorations, the archives convey the excitement of discovery. These photos, taken in 1975, show the pioneer of garden archaeology, Wilhelmina Jastrzębski, assisting as the head of a Julio-Claudian woman is discovered in the north garden of Villa A, along with the pedestal that supported it. You can see this fine portrait in the exhibition. 8 more sculptures were found later in the final excavations leading up to the year 1981. Many of them were found where they fell, on bases and pedestals around the swimming pool. After they were partially conserved, the photos you see on the right were taken. This was the one day in the summer of 1978 that the sculptures were set up for a television report. It was the only time that they were displayed in anything like the way they were in antiquity. The following day, everything was hauled into the site warehouse, where they have remained for 45 years. Particularly lovely is the photo on the upper left, where we see an excavator falling in love with the beautiful Nike on exhibit here. We get more of the excitement of that day in this group of photos. Note the photo on the lower left. It's the statue of Artemis, also another beauty in the exhibition, being hauled on poles up to the warehouse. At the upper left is the site inspector adjusting the head of a young male athlete. This statue is currently on exhibit in the town hall of Torre Annunziata. And I will say that one of the collateral benefits of creating this exhibition was to get the citizens of Torre Annunziata excited about their own antiquities and to find a space in their town hall, the Palazzo Criscuolo, for exhibiting them. So for the first time, the people of Torre Annunziata are seeing what they always wondered was hidden in those awful warehouses, and now they can see some of the riches. On the lower right is a justly famous group of Arandi satyr struggling with a hermaphrodite that was found at the edge of the swimming pool. Recently, this sculpture was on view in the exhibition entitled Pergamon and the Hellenistic Kingdoms of the Ancient World at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Today, a visitor sees a bare landscape around the pool. Ideally, copies of the sculptures should be placed there. But our own approach is to restore them to their original setting using 3D modeling. Below you see a screenshot from the 3D model with the sculptures put back in place. You can walk along the pool and admire them right here in Northampton. All you need to do is navigate the 3D model. To get to a 3D model is a very complex and expensive process. In order to capture an image in 3D, it's necessary to scan it. There are 2 main methods to achieve a 3D image: laser scanning and photogrammetry. The laser scanner shoots thousands of laser beams at every surface of the object. In post-processing, the surfaces of the object are reconstituted into a mesh made by triangulating the points. To create a 3D image through photogrammetry, the operator takes many digital photographs from all possible angles, and then the software stitches them into a 3-dimensional replica of the original. At this point, I'd like to shift gears and turn to one of our big research questions. What distinguishes Villa A from the other big luxury villas in the area? How wealthy was it? This question got me thinking about marble. It all started with this room, which looks very dull because all of its marble was removed, stripped away before the eruption of 79 AD buried the villa. In fact, nearly all of the marble, including 22 extremely expensive gray marble columns from a quarry on the far-off island of Lesbos, were gone. We know that they were there because we found their bases. They once supported a 165 8-foot-long portico that ran along the pool. Here you see the only one left in place because it was too hard to remove, being a half column built into the wall. Another clue came from our paleobotanists who studied the plant remains in our gardens and determined that noxious weeds were growing there. There were no cooking utensils in the kitchens, nor any tableware, and above all, no human skeletons. The only skeleton that was found at Oplontis, not too many people know this, was that of a cow, which is another indication, how could a cow wander into, even during the eruption, a beautiful villa? What was she doing there? Anyway, it was clear to the excavators and us that no one was living in the villa at the time of the eruption. What happened? I think that the damage from the series of earthquakes in the area that began with the one on February 5th, 62 AD, made the villa uninhabitable, and that the owner decided to sell off the marble, including the precious cut marble floor and wall revetments, the monolithic columns I just mentioned, and the marble statues. To reconstruct the original marble decoration, Simon Barker and Courtney Ward spent days scraping through the floors and walls of this room for fragments of marble pieces that adhered. This is the result of their research. A beautiful room with precious cut marble designs on the floors, with marble panels making up the wainscoting, and with wood paneling above. There is an even larger room that had marble floors and wainscoting with huge fluted columns framing the view to the pool. And even the portico along the pool had a mosaic with insets of precious marbles from the entire Mediterranean. These discoveries led to isotopic analysis. Professor Donato Attanasio and his lab at the National Research Center in Rome sampled all the stone materials used to decorate the villa, including the sculptures, and subjected them to analysis that allowed them to determine the quarries where the marble came from. It's a map of the entire Mediterranean. What we don't understand in this age of easy importation of marble from throughout the world is what it meant to adorn your house or villa in this fashion in antiquity, having marble from remote places, especially extremely expensive pieces like the monolithic columns, that is, columns made from a single piece of stone. That meant you were really rich. I did more research and found out that Villa A was unique among its peers in having marble columns and capitals like the ones in the exhibition. Other villas, like the Villa Ariana I just showed you from Stabiai, had brick columns covered in faux marble plaster. The other indicator of great wealth at Villa A was its sculpture. Not in bronze, like the famous Villa of the Pompeii at Herculaneum, but in marble. There's an ongoing debate among scholars about whether bronze or marble was the more precious and expensive material for sculpture. There are very few bronzes left from the classical period because the metal was inevitably scavenged and melted down in desperate times. But the few that we do have from classical Greece, like this warrior found under the sea at Riace in Calabria, are spectacular. Here I compare it with the exquisite charioteer found at Mozia on the island of Sicily, sculpted in marble. They date within decades of each other in the early classical period. But 500 years later, making bronze sculptures to decorate gardens became a routine practice with often banal results. And forgive me if you're in love with these ladies, I'm not. Workshops were set up to turn out multiples using molds for body parts and soldering them together. I think you can see this routine copywork in these bronzes from the Villa of the Pompeii, some of the 63 found in excavations in its garden. Making such sculptures in bronze from molds was much easier than carving a single huge block of stone to make a sculpture like the magnificent Nike in our exhibition. Our research on stone decorations of Villa A took us in a very interesting direction and helped establish that marble spoke to ancient viewers in a way it might not to us. It showed that the owner could pay for exotic marbles from the entire Mediterranean and to hire sculptors to create sculptures in stone that showed his or her taste as a collector. Although dubbed Villa B, the site 400 meters to the south of Villa A was not a luxury villa or even a rustic or farming villa. And to understand this site, we had to design different research strategies. It was a commercial center surrounded by modest two-story apartment buildings. For this reason, we called it Oplontis B. Its impressive two-story peristyle, built about 100 years before Villa A, around 150, saw intense commercial activity. Was it the property of Lucius Crassus Tertius, whose seal ring was found in the debris? You can have a look at this ring with the abbreviation LCRSTER in the exhibition. Or was Lucius the manager of the wine bottling that took place there? The four sides of the peristyle were filled with wine jars known as Dressel 2-4 amphorae, stacked upside down, the pointed end of one vessel inserted into the mouth of the one above it. Presumably, this was a way of storing empty amphorae to dry after being washed and pitched. Now, in official publications, you will read that there were 400 amphorae there. Last summer, we finished counting them, 1,341. And we also have just published the first analysis of the residues from these amphorae. We were only able to sample 11 of them. This work was done by Alessandra Pecci from the University of Calabria and her team. And what we found is that, yes, they were filled with wine, and yes, the interiors had been made impermeable with pitch, which makes me think that it probably tastes like Retsina, not my favorite thing, and that they were reused. And that's a very important thing. This makes sense then. We see our upside-down amphorae, they're drying. Another astounding discovery of the late 70s and early 80s at Oplontis B were two groups of skeletons, 54 in all, found in a barrel-vaulted room south of the big peristyle. The first group, toward the entry of the room, was loaded with coins and jewelry. This is a photo of skeleton 27, with a particularly rich hoard of jewelry and coins that was found with it. For this first group, excavators removed the bones, many of them crushed by the collapse of the ceiling, and put them in crates for study. The second group, which you see here, was at the back of the room, and it was excavated several years later. This group had no money or jewelry, but rather lanterns and tools. These were left in place, as you can see in this photo. Some scholars have proposed that this group at the back of the room consisted of slaves, segregated from their masters even in death. You will find fine examples of the coins and jewelry in the exhibition. Some of the coins, especially the gold ones from the period of Titus and Vespasian, are mint fresh, since they didn't have time to circulate before the eruption. Others, especially a group of silver denarii, include really old coins, like this one of Quintus Caecilius Metellus of 130 BC. These coins show a lot of wear from over a century of circulation. Some scholars have proposed that these denarii belong to a special coin hoard. Like the study of the coins, examination of the jewelry has lots to tell us. One study carried out by Courtney Ward reveals that some of the pieces were heirlooms. And alongside pieces of great value and fine workmanship, she found pieces that appear to be only of sentimental value, the equivalent of inexpensive costume jewelry. And as we embark on further study of the skeletons in the next 2 years, we hope to gain a better understanding of their diets, of their health, and of their patterns of travel. Working through the archives, we realized that existing plans of Oplontis B were inaccurate, depending as they did on old surveying technologies. To achieve an accurate plan of Oplontis B, we engaged Marcus Abbott to record every wall, floor, and ceiling with laser scanning. The process is similar to the one used for objects like the sculptures I mentioned earlier. The scanner emits millions of laser beams to create what's called a point cloud array. Software then knits these points together into polygons that are so numerous that they provide a 3D image. On the left is the setup of the scanner, and on the right, a section of the 3D scan showing several amphorae leaning against a bank of hardened volcanic material. Although it doesn't look like much, remember that the image on the right, unlike a conventional photograph, is fully three-dimensional. Compare the setup of the laser scanner with the resultant image here. The point cloud array has recorded the current position of the skeletons so that if they deteriorate further, scholars will have an accurate record. What is more, because they're recorded with great precision, measurements in the laser scan equal those of the skeletons within 5 millimeters. We could also print them one-to-one. And obviously, it would be near impossible to get an overhead shot of the skeletons using conventional photography. As for the building as a whole, a scan like this, because of its near-perfect accuracy, far outstrips plans made with the total station, the kind of electronic transit or theodolite normally used in archaeological recording. It would take a full day of work with the total station to shoot about 20 points, while the laser scan will have already created several million. So, although this image may not look like much, scans like this one enabled one of our architects, Jess Galloway, to create the first accurate plan in 3 dimensions of Oplontis B. And because of this three-dimensional quality, Abbott's scans, that is, the scans of the interiors and exteriors, can be imported directly into the 3D model that we're building. How to publish all of this research? Everyone likes to dig, nobody likes to publish. It's kind of one of the sad rules of archaeology, or truths, rather. We decided to publish in 3 ways: as an open access ebook, as a navigable 3D model, and as a database linked to the model. Volume 1 of our Born Digital ebook appeared in December 2014. I'm going to give it to all of you right now. All you need to do is type Oplontis HEB in your browser and you'll have full access. And let's just go there. Oplontis Villa A. The features of an ebook and its virtues are many, and I've realized this having been totally tied to the print book for most of my career. For one thing, it is inexpensive and everyone can have it. Thanks to the American Council of Learned Societies and to our project, anyone, anywhere in the world can go there anytime. The second thing that I particularly like is the navigational possibilities. Of course, we can search for any term whatsoever. So for instance, let's try, I put it in already, wood panel, since we found one of those. Search results. So if we go there, we'll find my discussion of the room with wood panels that I talked about earlier, D8 to 78. It's the only documented wood panels in any excavation in the Vesuvian region. And so we can read about fancy wood that was used to decorate in ancient times, but no one's ever found any. We found some, so you can go there and look at it. The other thing that I like, and I think I'll just go there to show it, is that you have illustrations that you can blow up and really look at carefully. So I click on this, and we can zoom. We can see Stefano De Caro's handwriting here. This is from the daybook where I found the information about the wood panels. And also the unlimited color illustrations. And finally, we've included archival material. That is scans of the daybooks, scans of photographs, all sorts of things that in a normal book the editor would say, we don't have the money for that. You're allowed 20 color images, that's it. So, we're in the middle of the villa. we're in a room that was first a bath and then later became an entertainment suite. And what the model allows you to do is to look at, walk around, see things as you would see them. There's the room next to it, and so on. So you can walk around the villa. If you want a mini map to tell you where you are, that little red dot tells you where you are. And one of the things I love is you get light levels. So here's a slider which tells us that it's noon. But what would it look like in the morning? What would it look like at night? Oh, not much. And then the other thing I love. Oh, let's go. Oh, I'll stay where I am. I get really excited when I have this model. I'm in command. Kind of. I've had to learn how to do lots of things. What did it look like before? So we have reconstructions done, digital reconstructions, which show what it would have looked like without all the damage. And then finally, and I think this is the thing that makes it more than a game or a curiosity, we have it directly linked to the database for that room. So we're in room 8, and it's loading information. And if we click on this, we get, they don't have the high res, we get a medium res image to show us what the actual state of that wall is now. There are many other possibilities. For instance, if we don't want wall and ceiling decor, we can go back and look at related photographs and other related entries. And if we don't want photos and files, we can go into archives, or we can go into archaeological reports. In other words, this is a way of what I would call existential learning and existential research, because you're actually kind of have your hands on all the data and you locate it geographically or physically in space. A lot of people have a hard time reading a book that's discursive and then saying, oh, look at plate number 3 and compare it with plan number 2 and so on. Here we bring it together, and we're refining it even as we speak. We have a, but I won't go into all of that. I'm going to go back to the model for a minute and jump to somewhere else. Why don't we just walk? It's more fun. As long as I don't fall in the pool. That happens to me all the time. Oh, this is good. So that's the wall that the exhibit has. In the exhibition, you can see pieces of this wall, which was never excavated, because those pieces blew off the top of the wall and were in the debris, and they couldn't fit them into this puzzle. I don't know if those of you who've seen the show can recognize that what we have is a part of the upper left, which is not complete on the wall in the villa. This is what it looks like if you go there today, but it has much more information in the fragments that you see in the exhibition. And there's the way it looked in antiquity. I'm going to go to another place that's really nice. So this is the triclinium as restored. And here we had to use archival photographs because the excavators lost about half of the left-hand wall. And so in order, you can see that it's very lacunose. That whole piece at the upper left of the model that you see now, we found drawings and photographs, the original photographs from 1967 with another stroke of luck. And so we were able to reconstruct it. And then I'm going to go to the cubiculum since that's in the exhibition. You can actually go in the show and sit in this room. Isn't that wonderful? And that's what it looks like in actuality. Even reconstructed the mosaic floor. Okay, so, with this slider, and I'm just going to go one more place. Be patient with me. I can't help myself. We're going to go over to the pool area. No, that's good enough. I think I'm inside a garden room. Yes, I am. Okay, let me jump out. All right. And here we see the pool area and the excavation in actual in its actual state. And we looked at, in my talk, we've already looked at the reconstruction of this room with the marble put back and so on. Okay, well, enough. Basta, as they say. Our aims with the 3D model were threefold: to record the actual state of the villa, to relate all of its features to the project database, and to create a tool for testing research hypotheses. In this excerpt from the model, we're testing the views through the famous garden rooms. They were inserted between the three main dining rooms of the east wing and were not meant to be entered. There are no doors, only windows. They were also open to the air and rain, painted with garden representations, and they had plants in them. So I'll run this again. This is again the work of Tim Liddell. So what you have is a visual lineup of garden rooms with dining rooms in between through the windows, and then a path, which we're taking now, of interconnecting corridors and doorways that allowed you to circulate physically. So you could circulate with your eyes or actually walk down and see and peer into these rooms as we're doing in this particular view. Our initial charge back in 2005, when we first got permission to study, excavate, and publish the Villas of Oplontis, was to apply the widest range of techniques from traditional excavation to digital research to this important UNESCO World Heritage Site. I'm surprised at how much we've been able to do, thanks to funding from the University of Texas, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Leverhulme Foundation in the UK, who jump-started our 3D model, and generous private donors. Thanks also to our 46 scholarly collaborators and 40 or so eager volunteers who arrive each year to help. It's been an adventure, as I hope my talk indicates. The jewel in the crown, as far as I'm concerned, is this marvelous exhibition. First conceived in 2009 and realized with the work of individuals too numerous to name. It is, of course, to Elaine Gosda that I owe special thanks, for she really brought it all together. It's a very different kind of exhibition from those blockbusters on Pompeii, entertaining as they are with their CGI volcanoes rumbling and wild speculation run amok. This show is monographic in the sense that it takes you deeply into the very different lives lived in these two adjacent complexes. If we must picture lavish entertainments in Villa A, really, I've always imagined they were doing water ballet performances in that 200-foot-long swimming pool. At Oplontis B, we would have seen the hustle and bustle of a thriving wine bottling emporium. Side by side as they were, Oplontis B represents the commerce and hard work of ordinary people, some of them slaves, who made the life of leisure and luxury of Villa A possible. Unlike any other exhibition on Pompeii, this one provides an in-depth view, and because of your easy access to the scholarship, behind the exhibition, whether through the ebook or the 3D model or the database, you can carry on your own research. And by the way, you can go to the database directly from our webpage and explore it on your own. This is what I hope the Oplontis Project, and especially this traveling exhibition, has accomplished. I speak for the many dedicated individuals who are part of the project when I tell you that our greatest pleasure is to share our discoveries, big and small, with you. I hope that this exhibition will pique your interest and perhaps will bring you to the site someday. But even if Torre Annunziata is not on your bucket list, we hope that you will continue to explore Oplontis through this exhibition and our electronic publications. Thank you so much.
I have a question about the paintings and the resemblance in terms of the illustrations among all of the excavations in Pompeii and Herculaneum. And I wonder if there were artists that worked or I don't imagine it was the same people, but what's the connection between the images and the style between these various places?
Well, back in 1882, August Mao created a dating system we still use. It's still valid. First, second, third, and fourth styles of Romano companion wall painting. At Oplontis, we have second, third, and fourth, which is very, very useful. We also have lots of indications, as Regina G. points out in her essay for Volume 2, which is about to come out. We have evidence that people kept period rooms and restored them. So we can find painters coming back 45 years later and the owner saying, oh my gosh, the right-hand wall is deteriorated, and they'll say, oh, we'll imitate that style for you. So the period styles at Oplontis are the old Western core is 50 BC in the mature second style. The additions to the northwest are in third style, of about 1. And then the additions in the fourth style and that whole eastern area around the pool are after 45 AD. So, we have also correlations with specific kinds of decorations and decorators at Pompeii and Herculaneum. So there probably were teams of decorators that were hired at various points. But it's a long span from 50 BC to 79 AD. And it's very interesting that the owners really prized those old rooms and made great efforts to preserve them. Does that answer your question a little bit? Okay, thanks.
Do you have any evidence how that huge pool was kept full?
We wish we did, but there was one excavation in the town. The town is very dense on top. That there was an aqueduct. The question is whether it tied into the Augustan aqueduct that fed Pompeii, and we don't know that because we can't follow it. It had to have had a really big source of water because that's, I don't know how many cubic meters of water would take to fill the pool. Have we ever tried to figure that out? I don't know if we have. And the excavators did not find residues of salt, so it probably was not salt water. And now that we know that the villa was up on that 45-foot cliff, how would you have gotten seawater up there anyway? So don't know. It'd be nice if we could find, if someone else excavated above the villa and found evidence for a water supply. For Villa B, or Oplontis B, they were washing pottery even at the time. And it may be that they were able to tap into a water source. There are artesian wells in the area that occur because of the volcanic activity, and they may have had fresh water from a source that was much nearer than the Augustan aqueduct. And also, in the earthquake of '62, the Augustan aqueduct collapsed, putting Pompeii out of the water business. And so the fact that they were washing pottery at Oplontis B in the, or amphorae, in the, between 62 and 79, seems to indicate that there was a water source, a separate one nearby.
Hello, John. I'm Ann Koloski-Ostro.
Yes.
And I want you all to hear somebody in this audience say what a generous scholar John has been, not just to his team, but you can see in the way he wants always to make available his material to the rest of the world, that he is so wide open. He's helped me so much in my own career for years and years. And although he says maybe Oplontis isn't on your bucket list, I've been going there every year for 30 years. And I see every time I go, I learn something more from, especially from now in recent years, from John's work. But John, I wonder if you could say a word about the atrium of the Villa A, the east wall, the right-hand side of the east wall, where the reconstructors look as if they've left a piece of plaster raised up to show there was earthquake damage. At least that's how a guard once explained it to me, or maybe it was Stefano De Caro, that it's supposed to look like the wall was shifted. And when they reconstructed it, you can see there's 2 layers of fresco, one on top of another. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the west wall. Yeah, which was the first one that they excavated. The problem in determining motivation is difficult. I think that they determined, so the technique that they used to reconstruct the walls, to bring them up high enough so they could put modern roofs on the villa, was called like for like substitution. So what they call it cucci e scucci in Italian, which means to sew up and unsew. In other words, to get something to stabilize the wall, usually kind of like a big pole with planks against it, and then figure out how they can keep it up, and with using the least modern material possible. And there, they made the decision to leave it as you say, the earthquake shifted the wall, and it doesn't really disrupt your viewing of the wall so much. In other places, like the opposite wall, where that photo of Stanley Jaschemski shows the whole thing collapsed, they had to just rebuild it from the ground up, and use that technique of applying the plaster, reconsolidated plaster pieces back, hooking them back on the wall.
Did you find anything in the excavation that particularly surprised you, or did it more confirm things you already knew?
I'm surprised every day. It's like the answer. Yeah, there are surprises of different sorts, and some of them are very long in coming. For instance, the search for any photographs from those first 6 years, it was thrilling when I found that the Stanley Jaschemski broke the rules and took photographs while the site was under strict surveillance, so to speak. And that was because his wife was such a wonderful person. She just talked to people and they'd invite them over. You can read her diaries, and reading diaries of this is pretty exciting too. So those photographs. And then there was the mysterious bundle. So here I'm not telling you about digging, but I can give you a few of those surprises too. There was a mysterious bundle that came from the German Archaeological Institute to the archives of Pompeii. And in the archivist, Dr. Stefani said to me, "I think I have something that you will enjoy." She opened up this packet. There were 30 black and white photographs of excellent quality showing those walls that we were trying to understand, and showing the excavation techniques, which were pretty awful, of that period, plus a bunch of color slides. So I was going around, in a daze because I had been looking for these since 1986, and that was 2008. Then there are things that you find that you absolutely don't, you can't fathom, and you have to study them and figure them out, that come from actual digging. Okay, so the most exciting thing that we found was, where is Professor Van de Graaff? Ivo? This young man, tell this story, go ahead. Which one? My story, the one about the third style fragment found in the trench. That's a good one. And it's in the show.
We were just, if I could put it mundanely, we were shifting a lot of dirt that day. And we found this context with huge pieces of fresco fragments. And we were just lifting up one after the other. And all of a sudden, dirt sort of collapses away, and this beautiful third style of frieze comes out. And, we all get excited. And John, we called John, who was off in the office dealing with bureaucracy. And he comes, and he was, I don't think I've ever seen so happy. He was like a little jiggle. And he immediately connected it to the third style room, room 8.
Yeah, which we looked at the model.
And the frieze. And from there, we could immediately connect all those, a lot of those fresco fragments to the actual villa itself. So that was, for us, a very exciting day, too.
Yeah, so we learned that they had demolished walls, and rather than taking care of trying to paste them back up, they just replastered and imitated the wall painting. So that was a third style wall dating to about, fragment dating to about 15 to 1 BC, and it was repainted 45 years later. And that's what you see when you go to the villa. So it was that was pretty amazing.
I had the good fortune to visit Oplontis in the early 90s. Happened to know a local person, and I was looking for things that were not touristy and that were really what was really happening there. And he said, "Oh, you have to see this new discovery." So it would have been the early 90s. And what I remember is a room that was mostly red background with very delicate, like wildflowers or something painted. And there was wainscoting. And then this was like right above the wainscoting. Where did they start excavating in the 90s?
They were done excavating in 1990. In fact, they quit in 1981 with a little bit more work in 83. So all the work during the 80s, which is when I started working there, was to open it to the tourists. And so by 1990, you would have been able to see more or less what you see today. So all the work of consolidating and putting in paths, for tourists and so on, was done between about 81 and 90. In 90, they opened the East Wing, which hadn't been open when I started working there because there were lots and lots of fragments that they hadn't resolved. I have in the ebook, my chapter just takes it year by year, and so you can see everything they did. So you could actually pinpoint your visit there by just looking at that chapter.
I think perhaps we should stop there because we'd like to invite everyone over to a lunch together in the Smith College Conference Center. You can head out the door out the side of the building here, and those who know the campus, you can sort of lead the way. So thank you.